The Hollywood Fringe Festival is, at least in my experience in Los Angeles, probably the most affirming kind of cultural experience that I've had. I should say that I haven't lived in Los Angeles for an incredibly long amount of time, and the kinds of things that I've spent time doing are of course influenced by who I am and what I feel comfortable and drawn to. But that being said, at Fringe, it's just really remarkable and not to just talk about, I guess, variety for variety's sake, but just the different kinds of people and the different kinds of interests that you encounter under the umbrella of, by and large, a shared desire to share. It's a kind of a social model that, not that that you could take a Hollywood Fringe Festival and make it a model of social organization for the entire world, because it's happens for a limited amount of time, and it is, obviously very much themed around theater shows, but the kind of camaraderie and affinity that people are willing to, and the vulnerability people are willing to demonstrate to be a part of it, both as an audience and as a performer, is just incredibly affirming of those aspects of existing as a human person that I feel like are often not made available in at least in a lot of my day-to-day experience under conditions of working and competition and anxieties about career, and to a certain extent money making. Fringe is really an experience driven by people who are really excited to share things that they're excited about and want to develop relationships around that excitement. Fringe is not where a lot of folks are going to with an intent to try to make a lot of money or become famous or become canonical figures in the theater world. That can happen occasionally from Fringe, but for most people, it's coming from a much more local desire to see, be seen, to appreciate, be appreciated, and to have that kind of ethos happening for the duration that Fringe happens for and at the scale that it's happening is something that I've rarely found in my life of participating in and experiencing people, sharing, creating and sharing, culture. And so I would highly recommend putting your own show up at Fringe or just going to see as many shows as you can. Because, with the reasons that people are doing it, it can, even if a show isn't exactly the sort of thing you would normally like, there's something that feels really, really lovely about having things shared with you in the way that people share things at Fringe, that I haven't found anywhere else. In Los Angeles, at least up to this point in my time there. My name is Benjamin Nicholson, and my play at the 2021 Hollywood Fringe Festival is called Deathless and Taxless, a Corporate Exorcism. If any of that sounds like it might be interesting to you, take a listen or a watch of this video and find out a little bit more. So the show that I'm doing, which is called Deathless and Taxless, a Corporate Exorcism, is in some ways has a lot to do with kind of my coming into my own understanding of my sort of how I exist in the world. Being a, white guy who's had access to a lot of what would be considered, a quality education and comes from what maybe at least would have used to be, called the middle class, although it's unclear exactly what, classes exist now with increasing kind of income disparities. Looking at myself and sort of the way that I've been able to live and the access that I've had to, resources and experience in business and things like that. And finding that there are elements of that experience that, as I become more aware of other ways that people exist and basically, frankly, just encounter more different kinds of people, realizing that there are, aspects of the privilege that I have and the things I've been able to do in my life that maybe come from a place of deep unfairness or injustice, and not in a way that's self-flagellating and that I'm trying to make myself feel bad about myself. That's not really the spirit of it, but really trying to explore, like, what are the mechanisms that allow for me to exist the way I do, And given all of the sort of privilege and access that I have, why do I still feel, at times this kind of deep malaise or dismay at sort of the state or condition of, the social structure that I'm part of? So mixing that in with my experiences in Silicon Valley, coming to understand that there's a tremendously damaging and toxic role that the form of what we call the corporation plays in our, social structure, both, domestically within the United States, but also globally as part of what I would refer to as a heavily neoliberalized kind of world ideology. Becoming fascinated by, historically, how did this form in the corporation come to be so powerful, and maybe more importantly, why does it feel like we can't do anything about it? Those were the sort of experiences that led me to want to write this show, which is my way of trying to manage my own response to the literal research that I've done, as it's part of my dissertation work for my PhD. But the way that the show, I guess if there's a story to the show, it's, the first half of it is literally called in the show, a didactic lecture about the corporation and its, presence in the world that we occupy, presented in a PowerPoint presentation in a very neoliberal corporate way. And the second half of the show is an exorcism, where I try to remove or have removed from me the corporate demon that I am, comparing to this, I guess, the sorts of exorcisms you might be familiar with in kind of, popular culture in movies like The Exorcist, or and any kind of popular consciousness understandings of what demonic possession might be, using that as both sort of a metaphor, but also a quite literal explanation for how the corporation exists in us in a very personal and local way, and trying to imagine how could, especially someone, who's a, white guy of relative privilege, like how I can remove those things from myself and cease to be part of the reproduction of the corporate form or neoliberalism, and what it would mean, if that were to come to pass, if I could de-neoliberalize to some extent, what that might mean for me, and then more broadly, what it might mean for other folks who are, I would say, suffering kind of the same affliction, or willingly participating in the ongoingness of this affliction. So for Deathless and Taxless, I'm working with Pam Knowles, who I'd worked with on my previous Hollywood Fringe Festival show, The Last PowerPoint. In the previous show, Pam was a presence in the show in that she, did actually interact with me, but in the capacity of my stage manager, being, in that show, refusing to display my PowerPoint presentation because, per the conceit of The Last PowerPoint, I didn't pay her the fees for stage managing my show, and therefore my PowerPoint presentation wasn't available, thus the whole rest of the show to follow. In this particular show, I'm working with Pam quite a bit more closely in the exorcism portion of the show to essentially have myself, or I guess allowing for me to perform as what I am referring to in the play as the corporate demon, and for Pam as sort of a foil to my character, or the version of myself I'm portraying, to perform as the exorcist, sort of leading the audience in a collaborative ritual to help expunge the corporate demon from my body, or what I'm calling in the show my corpse. And so, not only is Pam actually a performer in the show, and not only is Pam, literally managing as part of the show, but also very practically the kind of technical logistics of, the show as it happens. And I should mention that our show is entirely stream-based for several reasons, one of which being COVID, but another which is there's a desire to play with this idea of Zoom and what it represents as a thing that brings us together, yet is still has the specter of kind of corporate surveillance hanging over it, but that we're all essentially willing to participate in, knowing that to some extent. So yeah, not only is Pam stage managing and performing as this sort of exorcist in the show, but Pam and I are also collaborating very closely on how are we framing the show to people, what kinds of in this exorcism there'll be questions from the audience that will challenge the corporate demon. What kinds of questions are we trying to elicit, and what sorts of interrogations of the demon will actually be damaging to it. And if the demon is a metaphor for sort of corporate possession of our psychologies or our psyches, then how could this line of questioning and the performance of it in front of an audience actually lead to, not seismic changes in the people who are present, but an avenue through which people can question certain aspects of their lives and consider how, where are, kind of corporate interests that are ultimately deleterious to the majority of people. Where are those things a part of people's behavior, and are there things we can do about it? But to try to do all of those things in a way that is feels collaborative, as opposed to the kind of more neoliberal solution to any problem, which is that you should just take personal responsibility for it and fix it yourself. So Pam's been a big part of being a collaborator, and in the spirit of the show that I think is about a desire for more collaboration in our day-to-day lives, is an attempt, I think, to kind of actualize that, and has been a really great partner in putting the show together. I would love if, for the audience after seeing this show to not necessarily come away with sort of a bullet point list of, the ways that the, corporate form is, demonic or evil in some way. There'll be some of that in the show, just kind of explanations of the corporation as it's existed historically. But I think what I'd be much more excited for people to get out of it is maybe in a similar way that music affects you, that you're, maybe going about your day at a certain point after having seen the show, and maybe you're at your workplace and there's an opportunity to do just exhibit some little behavior that might allow you to advance because it's putting someone else down or undermining someone else. And in those moments that there's maybe just like with music, like when, you're feeling sad or happy and a song comes into your head, there might be a recollection of a certain aspect of the play that says, maybe it wouldn't be, even if it seems like a small thing, maybe I don't need to harm another person in order to, propel and grow my career. And then from there, maybe thoughts, follow of like, why do I care so much about my career? For whom is my career? Who is it for? Who does it benefit? Those are the sorts of things I would love to have emerge for people, is just, those kinds of day-to-day considerations about how their lives are being affected by this broader, and very deliberately engineered social structure that is aggressively expanding its purview and resources as time continues to go by. And then, maybe more a little closer to home, I would love to have emerge from this show the possibility of meeting new people, since people in the audience will be able to ask questions and interact with this demon version of myself directly. There's always some hope that could lead to a conversation or a relationship or a friendship or a collaboration, beyond the confines of the showtime. And I think that's a big part of Fringe. It's a big part of the spirit of Fringe as well. So I think that would be something I would love as well for folks who come to see the show, to the extent that they're interested, to keep, in touch with me and Pam, and to teach us things they know about or that they're excited about, and, potentially, contribute to a collaborative effort to what would take a collaborative effort to not have to structure so much of our existence around the interests of corporations and incredibly wealthy, often, older white men. I think people should come to my play at Fringe because I think, and this is true of a lot of shows at Fringe, but I'll just speak for mine. I think, Pam and I have really put it together with the audience in mind. We're not putting this together because we want to kind of aggrandize ourselves or because we want, you know, I guess more kind of fame-based affirmation, which isn't really something that, at least in my experience of the Hollywood Fringe, is not really what most people are in it for. But I think, coming to our show, you'll be addressed directly. The show is about engaging directly with the people who happen to be at any particular show. And I know that not everyone is comfortable kind of participating or interacting in a performance, but there is an explicit, half of the show that is about kind of direct interaction with the audience and giving the audience a chance to more than air grievances about the current state of our socioeconomic form, but to challenge an avatar of the corporation in the form of the demon that will surface from my body, to be able to put questions to that demon and to potentially be able to undo some of its power. We're hoping that there's a potential for catharsis, exploration, play that can come for that for folks who are interested in that kind of interaction, that will be made available. And I think that, Pam and I are working really hard to create a context in which that feels possible for an audience, but also that there are stakes to it, that there's something meaningful to be done by interacting with us. And so, yeah, I think, there's going to be a lot of really fantastic shows at Fringe, and different shows are going to mean a lot to different people, but we're trying to be very, very conscientious about the people who come to see the show and give them something that will be impactful and where they feel like there's a stake for them in being present, and that it's not just about sort of us, kind of promoting the things that we care about, that the audience is an important part of the experience that we're hoping to share. I think for me, there is an intention, and we talked about this in a way, but there's like a very real intention for once Fringe is over to continue developing this particular show or the things that emerge from it, that I'm not, very much trying to create what feels like a considered and, encapsulated experience within the, hour of this particular show's running time. But there's a really, true desire to actually be attentive to what comes out of the show for me and for people who are, part of it in one way or another, and then think about what could happen, after Fringe or at next Fringe, or, could we be friends? Could we have a relationship? Or could the show continue in other ways? Not at all to be enthusiastic about why we're, all using, or so many of us are using Zoom now. But I think one of the things that is exciting from the standpoint of being able to share things in a way that meet people where they're at is with people's increasing comfort with kind of telepresent communication. It makes it seem much more possible or viable that you could have, all sorts of ad hoc gatherings of people who are in very different parts of the world, doing very different things in a way that could feel deeply significant, which isn't to say that the way we've been using Zoom or that we've sort of netted out on how we use Zoom feels deeply significant, but just as another route to be with people, even if it's in a different way than being co-present with them, is really exciting from the standpoint of sharing ideas and developing relationships. And so, that's I think a big part of what I'm excited to observe and witness that comes out of the show is, am I going to learn things, or are other people going to learn things that might allow us to continue, developing the relationships and ideas that are in this show or in other shows people are doing beyond the Fringe Festival. And as I've mentioned, that to me feels very much in the spirit of the Hollywood Fringe Festival, that, people are not just looking to do their show and get out, but actually looking to incorporate the things that are happening at Hollywood Fringe into their ongoing existences in a meaningful way. So I think that's something I'm really looking forward to, or excited to see if it comes out of it. My name is Benjamin Nicholson, and my play at the Hollywood Fringe Festival in 2021 is Deathless and Taxless, a corporate exorcism. if you found any of this conversation or these thoughts interesting, I would love to have you come to, any of our Zoom exclusive shows where you will have the opportunity to directly ask a corporate demon some of the burning questions that you have about, your and our shared neoliberal existence. So looking forward to getting to share some time with you, and be safe out there.